This is 3-year-old Kaylee Anthony, who is now dead. Her mother, Casey Anthony, is the main suspect in this tragic case, a murder that is unsolved to this day, meaning that Casey is currently not in jail. A 14-year-long mystery with plenty of dark twists and disturbing details all started because of this one phone call from Cindy Anthony, the grandmother of the victim.
911, what's your emergency? I called a little bit ago, the deputy sheriff. I found out my granddaughter has been taken. She has been missing for a month. We're talking about a 3-year-old little girl. My daughter finally admitted that the baby's in the store.
Your daughter admitted that the baby is where?
But the babysitter took her a month ago. My daughter's been looking for her. I told you my daughter was missing for a month. I just found her today, but I can't find my granddaughter. There's something wrong. I found my daughter's car today, and it smells like there's been a dead body in the damn car.
Okay, what is the 3-year-old's name?
Kaylee, Caylee, Anthony.
Kaylee Anthony? Is your daughter there?
Yes.
Can I speak with her?
Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
Can you tell me what's going on a little bit?
I'm sorry?
Can you tell me a little bit what's going on?
My daughter's been missing for the last 31 days.
Who has her? Do you have a name?
Her name is Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez.
The very next day, Casey was arrested and led a group of police on a wild goose chase all over the city of Orlando, Florida. She took them to the seemingly uninhabited apartment of her daughter's babysitter, Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez, who was referenced in the phone call, and to Universal Studios, where Casey had been lying about having a job. This case instantly caught massive news attention for its weird details. However, the main question that the public asked was, why did Casey wait so long to report her daughter's disappearance?
Casey, why did you wait so long to report your daughter's disappearance?
Where's the baby?
Casey alleged that the babysitter Zenaida had run off with her daughter on June 9th. However, the only reason it was being reported 31 days later was actually because the grandparents of Kaylee had received a call that the family car had been sitting in an impound lot for 3 weeks. During their visit to the impound lot, George Anthony, Casey's biological father and former police officer, was immediately put off by an odor coming from their vehicle.
The odor that you were testifying a moment ago that this reminded you of from your past, was that the odor of a human corpse?
Yes.
Casey's initial interrogation after first being arrested sparked worldwide controversy and was heavily studied by criminal psychologists around the world. In analyzing the interview, we can see why this case is so controversial. Pay attention to Casey's demeanor, attitude, and the way she carries herself. It's in moments like these where the average person would be completely distraught, but not Casey.
But let me, I have to use the restroom, so if you'll give me a minute. That's right. And then we'll get you a phone.
Immediately, the police officer begins by using a common tactic, the restroom break, that allows them to strategize the best way to tackle the interrogation, while another nice, honest police officer creates a conversation with the suspect.
I'll sit here with you.
All right.
Since you walk out.
Water?
Nope, I'm fine, thank you.
I don't know if I should apologize for what happened on the highway or not, but
I almost feel like I shouldn't in a sense, but
You'll notice Casey's demeanor sway back and forth. Her mannerisms appear friendly and inviting, while simultaneously showing her nerves by rubbing her arms together and playing with her hair.
if I find out something that you don't want to hear, I'm going to tell you anyway.
well,
Just
honestly,
because-
they'll respect that. That's just, the type of people that they are in the same way.
Here, you'll notice another common tactic used by the investigators, trying to mimic the person they're trying to extract information from. Casey adjusts her pants, and so does he. Casey crosses her legs, and so does he. This is done as an attempt to try to relax Casey, put her at ease, and then get her to start talking with less reserve.
Tends to be when attorneys get involved.
I've heard most people say that. They don't like attorneys very much.
I have many family members that are attorneys. I have no problems with attorneys. What I have problems with are, at some point, we have to set aside the rules and we have to find kids. And you know what? So be it. That's why I told you in the car. If you tell me anything now,
Yeah.
I'll get up and say, yep, I heard it, and she'd already invoked it. We can't use any of it. That's just the way it is. That's all that matters to me.
Yeah.
At this point, the officers begin to open up into a bit more blatant speech. The detective is implying here that he understands that Casey has information that would lead to answers in this case. He even states that if she had just said something in the car ride over, they wouldn't have been able to use it because it was off record. It's interesting to note that rather than getting frustrated by the accusatory statements, Casey continues to play into ignorance, affirming what the investigator is saying rather than responding in a way that could be deemed incriminating. If we fast forward a little bit, a new investigator we have yet yet to see steps into the room to speak with Casey alone. You can tell from his body language that he isn't there to be nice and get her to talk, playing the role of the bad cop.
How was my dad this morning?
He had a hard time.
Yeah.
Honestly.
I only saw from the media and got a chance to hear him talking to my mom. I spoke to him last night and this morning for just a quick second before he left, so.
Yeah, I talked to him this morning for a little bit. He was with Mark, and he was really struggling. I mean, I can imagine he was having a hard time. He was being called in to essentially provide testimony to indict you, to at least. And he was really struggling with that.
Yeah.
And I felt bad for him, I'll be honest with you. I truly did.
Well, I even told him last night. I know he was subpoenaed, and under the law, he had to answer whatever questions were asked him, and I told him to do what he had to do.
When analyzing the entire interrogation, this moment stands out as the most interesting of all. It's clear that this officer's intent was to come back into the room to crack Casey, but again, she just fires back with a similar calm and cold response of, I told him to do what he had to do. To a normal human, the idea of a father struggling to indict their own child because they don't want to believe they're guilty would just bring about anyone to a breaking point. But this interviewer then decides that he wants to apply even more pressure, while Casey pushes on confidently that she's ignorant as to what happened entirely.
I, as a mom, I know in my gut there's feeling as a parent. You know certain things about your child. You can feel that connection. And I still have that feeling, that presence. I know that she's alive. Whether you have a bucket load of evidence downstairs that contradicts that and says otherwise, or all you have is speculation, or nothing at all. I mean, whatever it is, if there's still that chance with all of these tips that have come through, I know that a lot have been discredited, but
We ran them down.
and
we had more than speculation.
is every tip and
that's
every
something that I
lead
told her
followed up on?
directly.
Yeah.
That we have more than speculation. We have a lot, or else we wouldn't be to this point. A lot.
His pressure makes her uncomfortable, and you can see it. But rather than breaking, Casey once again makes her replies absurdly comfortable, even suggesting that they've reached 2 doors, and that they're gonna go one way to incriminate her, or the other way to find her daughter. Just as the man is finally getting Casey to a place where they may be able to pin her down for something, the other investigator in orange comes back to break the tension. This cuts off any potential missteps from Casey before her lawyer would then arrive over 40 minutes later. From this point on, Casey's lawyer then allows her to answer any questions within reason and then releases her from the interrogation. Throughout the rest of the case, Casey's character was never broken. She masked her anxious tendencies with this personality that she had carried her entire life. This constantly poised and poignant woman was living inside a shell of a character who she faked until it felt natural. But as the case is studied more and more, it becomes very obvious that all of this was just that, an act. December 11th, 2008. Over 6 months since Kaylee went missing, the skeletal remains of a little girl were found in a bag just half a mile from the Anthony home in the woods.
With regret, I'm here to inform you that the skeletal remains found on December 11th are those of the missing toddler, Kaylee Anthony.
Just 9 days later, after DNA testing the remains, they were found to be in fact that of Kaylee Anthony's. The death was immediately ruled a homicide by undetermined means. Despite finding her body wrapped up in a blanket and stuffed in a laundry bag with duct tape around her nose and mouth, the investigators were unable to determine the cause due to the advanced decomposition of Kaylee's body. Immediately following this discovery and report, Florida prosecutors would announce that they were going to seek the death penalty for the murder of Kaylee. The trial began May 24th, 2011, and the prosecution alleges that Casey's lack of care and a month spent shopping and partying were more than proof that her neglect was the reason that she was at fault for the murder of her daughter. Then, in an absolute bomb of a statement, the defense fired back with something that nobody could have seen coming.
She never was missing. Kaylee Anthony died on June 16, 2008, when she drowned in her family's swimming pool. You're going to hear that Kaylee loved to swim, and Kaylee could get out of the house very easily, and did so on that day.
The defense continued on after this, alleging that George Anthony had sought to cover up the accidental death of his granddaughter, even going on to say that George had molested Casey as a child, and that was the reason for her cold exterior she used to hide her pain. The defense then added as well that the utility worker who found Kaylee's body planted it in the swamp she was found in to help George cover it up. The trial continued from this point on in an all-out war. The prosecution brought up witnesses such as Casey's brother, who claimed of Casey's special bond with her daughter. killer. In response, the defense would also bring up witnesses like the owner of the towing company who had worked in the industry for decades and claimed to have seen multiple bodies in his experience. That man verified what he had smelt the day that George Anthony had visited the impound lot was in fact that of a decomposing body. Furthermore, FBI and forensic analysts argued that the amount of chloroform present in the trunk of the car could have just been as much from the decomposing body as it could have been from regular household cleaners being present. You may think that this evidence is damning, but in fact what comes next is far worse. At their June 8th trial, a software engineer is brought to the stand to allege that someone in the Anthony home was searching for foolproof suffocation, chloroform, and how to poison someone on an account that was primarily used by Casey Anthony on their home computer. Ultimately, this information was thrown out due to a malfunction in the engineer's software that miscalculated, revisiting a site that was about chloroform 84 times, as Casey repeatedly searched for it. On July 3rd, 2011, closing statements were given by both the defense and the prosecution with their intended goals in mind.
Remember, in this case, there wasn't one piece of duct tape placed over Kaylee's face. There were three, overlapping at angles, placed over her face. Why do you need three? What does three do that one does not? One would certainly silence her if for some reason that's what you wanted to do. As brutal as that would be, why do you need three? You need three because your purpose is not to simply silence the child. Your purpose is to make sure the child cannot breathe.
The state's goal was to convict Casey Anthony beyond a shadow of a doubt on the murder of her daughter and put her to death.
He had the opportunity to go back in there and ask Casey, we know what happened. Tell us about the swimming pool. And he never did. He never investigated this case as an accident. Never. He never pursued that. And that's why this case turned out the way it did, partially. Because law enforcement didn't want to keep their eyes open. Didn't want to look at every possible alternative. Didn't want to consider that there was something wrong with this girl. Instead, they had a murder case. And that was it. That was all they were interested in, was evidence of murder. There's nothing sexy about a drowning. There's nothing interesting about a drowning. And they didn't care.
And the defense's goal? To throw any and every hypothetical situation at the jury and judge in order to cause confusion and create a sense of doubt that what seemed so obvious was not the case at all. On July 5th, 2011, just 2 short days after closing arguments were laid out for the jury, a conclusion was made. Casey Anthony was found not guilty of first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and aggravated manslaughter of a child, but guilty of 4 misdemeanor counts of providing false information to a law enforcement officer. With credit for time served, she was released on July 17th, 2011, and walks free to this day.